Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Another fun episode planned today. Somebody that I've kind of been friends with on LinkedIn for a while now. And, Laura, welcome to the show. Really appreciate you carving out some time and space to interact.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So as we kind of a traditional thing here on the Humanist, I talk a little bit about the jar as part of the logo. It's also, kind of the how we got here, jar of 444 questions that I've used to interview 300 and something people on my way to 444, but 300 people in 96 cities. I'm just going to feel real quick and get one question just to start us off, Laura. We talked about, I got all excited and I'm not going to let you go yet. Who do you, so here's the first question to start off the conversation. We're going to get to a little bit to Laura and what she does and how you got here. So my question is, and this is for me, who do you talk to when you need guidance? It's great. So I've been changing my LinkedIn profile a bit, focus a bit more on my speaker business, highlight, that I really want to get into public speaking and leverage, all my experiences and the travels and the stories, interviews I've done, share those and share some of the nuggets of wisdom that people have kind of laid down during the journey. I've sent it to my daughter. I've sent it to my friends this morning, about 4 or 5, just close friends, and said, come hit me with the worst, find the worst thing on my LinkedIn page and hit me with that. And it was a rough morning. So I think I've rested and recovered from the personal advice on how to make it a little bit better. But I always go to my closest friends and ask for the unvarnished truth. And you got to have a few of those around. Got to have a few of those. And Laura,
Sure.
you're a coach. So sometimes that dynamic relationship where you become friends or friendly with clients, how do you package the unvarnished truth when they're really wrong? I mean, how do you help somebody see that without destroying the momentum or the ego? And how's that balance? You must be getting good at this by now.
I don't know if you ever get good at it. I think you just get better at it, maybe. It's
Yeah.
a great question. And I think as you said that, I was trying to think, when is that happening? And it's been happening actually for about 3 weeks with a very specific person who's obviously
Great.
shall remain nameless. But
Yes.
what's amazing is I think the card has been held up to her in so many different ways by so many different people, including myself. And it's sort of, if I have my red earbud case right here, and everyone says, "There's your red earbud case, Laura," and I look at it and I say, "I don't see it." At some point, that's willful, right? At some point, I can hold it in my hand, I can see the case, and I'm choosing not to see it. I'm
Okay.
choosing to say I don't see it. And so I
Interesting.
think one of the things that's been fascinating lately is we keep having this conversation about, so what if it were true? What if all these things that people are showing you are true, but you don't see it? Like, what does that get you? How does that move
Ooh,
you?
that's
Or because
well
it's in your way,
packaged.
these things are in your way. So if you want to get those things out of your way, you have to be able to acknowledge them first and to then say, okay, I might not really believe that this is red earbuds, but
Yeah.
I'm going to assume it is. And then what would I do if this were that? How might I then behave? What would I do differently? And I think that kind of accepting that you're not accepting it, but moving forward as if you were, is a role play really that I
Oh,
think can be quite powerful for people to do. Yeah.
this is it's a very Asian technique, right? Without being very direct, right? So sometimes there's
Right.
and I shouldn't say Asian, but in some Asian countries and a few of the ones that I, worked in or lived in, there's a really great way that they do this with people
Mhm.
is without pointing it directly at you, you know, and
Right.
kind of giving you some way to see the parrot, like to see it without actually
Right.
calling you out and
Right.
saying,
Yeah.
well, what do you think about like that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Not easy. Not easy.
No, no, no.
How do you get in? I mean, you were a consultant really early on. How did you get in there, and what was that like? Because very quickly you were started to do a lot of consulting with a lot of startups and a lot of businesses.
Yeah, and I mean, I've been in the consulting space for, gosh, over 30 years in some form or another.
Yeah.
And if I think about that, I don't know that I ever sought out to become one. I think I sought out ways that I could make a difference, have
Mm.
influence that would make organizations healthier, people's lives better. And that took lots of different forms, from being in academia, being in the nonprofit world, being
Yes.
in consulting. And I think the last probably 15 years, the coaching aspect of that for me that's for me is where the most power is. Not for me, but I think the most powerful work that I'm able to contribute to um, is really there, because I guess I fundamentally believe, and I changed my signature of my name to say leadership is a relationship, because
Yes.
fundamentally that's my
Yeah.
worldview, right? Like, leadership is a relationship between people. And so if we can't fix or build or support or grow or challenge leadership, we don't move forward. We just stay where we are.
Mm.
And that part, I think, being what I have called myself often in my life, like a change agent, been a part of my personal vibe, my brand, my way of being
Mm.
for a long time. I'm just not interested in the status quo. And so coaching is anything but the status quo, right? It's
Yeah.
all about growth and change and how you get to the next place, and how you bring people with you, how you help your organizations thrive.
Yeah.
And I think so many people in startup space, especially if they're young entrepreneurs, and many are, they haven't had other leadership roles. They might have even had
Mm.
another job before. They might not have ever worked for anyone.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they're coming into it without sort of the experiences individually, interpersonally, publicly, of how I show up and present my ideas, how I gain buy-in, how I move people to action. And, in many ways, it's a persuasion strategy. And I mean that persuasion in
Mm.
the most ethical fashion possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, you and I have talked, but I think back to my academic life, and, the idea, the Aristotelian notion of persuasion is it's all rooted in character, competence, and goodwill coming from the person who's doing the speaking or the acting. And so I'm
Oh,
always striving to
yes.
help my clients see that, okay, like, who am I? Am I showing up as a good leader? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I care about something more than myself? And if the answer to those things is yes, the odds are darn good that you're going to be
Yeah.
more successful than if the answer is no.
Yeah. I love your tagline, leadership is a relationship. And kind of reminds me that the old adage, and I just used this the other day, where I was in a corporate world where people said, basically, even HR people would straight up tell you, when you come in that door, you leave all of, that guy behind, whatever that stuff is. And you come in here, you take your job title off the shelf and you stick it on your forehead, and you're going to walk around and be that person. And that's your identity. And you're supposed to be in that mode, and that behavior. You're supposed to have that action. You're being an actor. And
Mhm.
however you feel, whatever things, challenges in life, forget about it, leave it at the door. So the notion that a leader is supposed to have relationships is crazy under those guys, right? I mean, that's really crazy talk. How did
Yeah.
we get there? Because we're in a beautiful place that we
Yeah,
can put
yeah,
that on, and you're found that to be, even you can put that on LinkedIn and still stay in business. We're in a new era,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're not in the 80s and the 90s anymore.
yeah,
How did you see
yeah.
this grow? Is this something that I mean, obviously you would have had some of this in your own character, but to be able to use it as a tagline.
It's a really interesting question, because it just sort of came out of my mouth one day that way, but I don't think it was new to me when it came out of my mouth. I think I
Yes,
had
yeah,
always
yeah.
believed that. I just hadn't expressed it in that way. And I think at the end of the day, if my job as a leader is to move people in a direction, to take some action,
Mhm.
um, I have to care about them in order to motivate them. I have to see them as humans, or it becomes extractive and exploitive. And so when I look at
Ah,
cultures
yeah.
that fail, and I could go down the rabbit hole of what's happening on a world stage right now with all of the horrific deaths of thousands of people and all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
And I think if I use you as a means to my end, or I see you as something subordinate to me as a human, maybe you are in positional power in my organization or something.
Yes.
But if I don't see you as fully human, um, I'm losing out on you, and you're losing out on the opportunity to
Mm.
use your full talent, power, abilities, knowledge, skills, emotional and social intelligence to do the job. So, why would I only want part of you to show up at work? I can get a machine to do most of those things now. Like back in the day, we couldn't do that.
Yes.
But now there's machines for most things. But I want a human. I want a human in that seat, one who can make decisions that are balanced, that are just, that are caring, that recognize humanity.
Yeah, it's interesting the way when you're saying that, I'm kind of getting that AI feel. And yeah, the more those tools come in, the machines come in, the more that the human part has to show up because that's what makes us
Yes.
unique.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's machines can do all kinds of stuff now. But what
Yeah.
they can't do is this.
Let's try a question. I've got a couple
Yeah.
more questions for you, but let's see where the jar takes us just for fun. So pulling question from the jar again, 444 questions, like life questions. In case you're listening on the audio version, well, I would imagine that okay, I have a lot of answers to this one for you already in my brain. Has so this one seems like a real natural for you. Has someone ever made themselves truly open and vulnerable to you?
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day.
What
And I
is that
think, and
like? I mean, because that's a lot of responsibility.
it's a lot of responsibility. And I think, I don't think I even knew people were, and this is looking back over many years' time. If you had asked me that 20 years ago, I would have gone, I don't know, but if I look back in hindsight,
Yeah,
yes, all the time.
yeah.
And I think I'm a pretty open person, and so what you see is what you get. I tell it like it is.
Mm,
I'm not hiding behind any mask or smoke and mirrors. And I think because of that, people are more willing to do it. I think I've been in a pretty intense situation with a client recently, and I feel like the level of vulnerability that I'm getting from this person
mm,
is so intense, because there's nowhere else to go with it, and for her. And I
yes.
feel like, she has supports and everything. I'm definitely not a therapist, don't pretend to be one. She has support in that way, but when it comes to what's happening in her work life, she doesn't have somewhere else to go with it. And so I'm trying to I like to fix things, and I'm trying to not be a fixer because that's not my job. But I can see these little things that I think if she's willing to be this vulnerable here, if she could just do a little bit more of that in her work environment, the
Okay.
problems that she's facing would go away because she's armored up, right? She's got full battle gear on,
Yeah.
and everyone else is sort of playing in the park with a dog and wondering who's the soldier
Oh,
running around?
there's a
So it's
ninja running
very,
around taking
yeah, it's
off
like, who
heads
is
and
that? What's going on there? So, yeah, I don't know if that really answered the question, but
yeah,
that's what
no,
came to my mind.
that
Yeah.
is, and then I think maybe, I'm presumptuous because I'm not a woman, but I think sometimes to get to positions where you've got some power and like authority and leadership, sometimes you've got to have the battle armor on as a woman. I would imagine as you move through, but then no, so now she's at that crossroads where she's earned it, she deserves the respect, and she has to shed the armor and be more of a human.
Mhm.
How do you coach somebody to make that change? Because sounds like that. I mean, from an outside, just a
Mhm.
2 second consulting, you know,
Yeah,
that would be it,
yeah,
right? How do you coach them out of the armor and into the vulnerability part? Because that's a real change.
yeah. And I think sometimes in this situation, the environment would allow for that, like, it would welcome it,
Yes. Yeah.
um, and I think it would shift things dramatically for her and for the people that work with her and for her. And I think the reward, and this comes into, how do systems play a role in our interpersonal relationships, right? So the systems that are in place in the organization she's in, and then the norms in the organization she's in,
Yeah.
make it risky for a woman to take that chance. You could be a man and
Okay.
do it, but
Yeah.
you can't be a woman and do it. So the question is, how much do you peel back that armor?
Yes.
How much do you, and they don't have to be, I'm going to come and tell you my life story and we're going to, get out the tissue and cry about all my life loss and all that. That's not what it's about. It's little pieces of showing that
Mm,
you're a real person. And I see sometimes in the armoring up part, a whole lot of perfectionism that comes along with that. Being, well, it's
mm,
got to be exactly this way. And believe me, my personal brand for many years was controlling and relentless. And anyone who knows me that's listening to this will laugh out loud because it really was my personal brand. And I'm so far from that now.
oh,
But why was that? It was like that because the environments that I was in demanded a certain set of things.
yeah.
And the only way I knew how to get it was the way I knew how to get it. So I wasn't going to fail and I wasn't going to let anybody else fail. So there's lots of ways to bake a chocolate cake. I had my way, and that was the only way I knew. And no one around me was saying, here's an alternative chocolate cake recipe. Try this. Eventually they did. And that was just mind blowing that excellence could be achieved in many ways. And I could let go of my way and learn new ones. So I
Just
use
now.
that a lot with clients, honestly. Because I've played lots of different kinds of leadership roles and I've, been a business owner before and run companies. And I just think that was that recognition of, oh wow, that's armor, right? That's armor. That's not
Yes.
vulnerability on my part. That's armor. I'm going to protect myself by structuring my way into whatever I need to create. And I miss the human connection.
Yes. Yeah.
I miss the human connection.
There's more than one way to make a chocolate cake. It sounds like a great
I
book.
do. I don't know why I said that. I'm not a baker, but hey, it's what comes to
Yeah.
mind. We
Yeah,
use what
no,
we
I mean
have.
it's magic. I mean, sometimes I hear great book titles. I sometimes they play
Yeah,
in my head. That one definitely. There's more than one
there's
way to
more than
make
one way to make a chocolate cake.
there's your book.
There's my book.
Uh,
I'll credit you for the title.
for the title. Yeah. I'm curious what the cover looks like. Maybe
Yes.
three kids making a chocolate cake with a mess
Yeah.
everywhere with no directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, my youngest granddaughter sometimes just makes a creative kitchen, just makes stuff. Like she kind of copies mom
Yeah.
and dad and just puts stuff in, and then they put it in the oven just for fun.
Yeah.
And then they all critique it. It's her comments on her own cooking. There's no failure. It's all experiments. You know. So her comment on her own, yeah, I don't think I'm going to put that many eggs in the next one, or that was a lot of
Right.
baking soda. You know, um, it is interesting to watch though if you can be a cook and also be your own best critic without being a critic, right? There are
Yeah. Yeah.
Bob Ross, right? There are no accidents, just these little
Right.
these little happy accidents.
Right.
Um,
What you just said about the cook thing made me think too. I think there's a difference between being a cook and being a chef.
oh yes,
And so when I think about, if I apply that to, leadership management continuum, I think about management more as being a cook. There's
yeah,
stuff you got to get it done. There's a certain amount of it.
yes,
It has to be produced or responsible. The
yep,
chef has to look at what's available. A good chef doesn't try to cook something that's out of season, right? They go to the
yes,
market, they look at all the great stuff, they pick it out. Oh, this looks fabulous. I'm going to make this because I'm inspired. And I think great leaders do that. They look around at, what's available in the aisles of wherever they are, their work environment, their community, their networks, and they make something great out of it. It's like, wow, what is that? Let's make
yeah.
some of that. That's inspiring.
I
That's
love that.
inspiring.
What are you seeing coming out of COVID now? We're out of COVID theoretically. We've got a bit of a hangover mentally. I
Yeah.
think we're still struggling, mentally a bit, getting back to whatever the new normal is, and then kind
Yeah.
of shaping that. And leaders have got to
Hmm.
shape, they're fighting against a bit of this hangover and then trying to get businesses to manage all the people, because now it becomes a real
Hmm.
people thing. I mean, people are all of a
Yes.
sudden hugely center stage and the humanity of people, right? Recognizing where we're
Yes.
at. What are you seeing? Is there a mind shift change from leaders now? Are they asking these questions or are they past it already?
Oh, they're definitely not past it. I think some of them are asking questions and some of them are asking the right questions.
Hmm.
I think the right questions in my mind are, what can we do? What have we learned? What do our people need? How can we best facilitate a productive, thriving workforce that
Hmm.
does their job well? I think some of those that are a bit more challenged are asking, are not asking questions. They're telling people, you will do this and you will do that, and you will return to your desk and you will be in person every day and you will.
Yes.
And people are quitting their jobs because we've proven that you don't actually have to go there, wherever there is, to
Yeah.
do it. And the balance that I think people have been able to experience in their lives, and it cuts both ways. When you're working at home, you're also home at work, working at home. But
Yeah.
I think that that sense of I have a client right now who the C-suite has determined that everyone will work in the office 3 days a week.
Okay.
And this woman, who is a member of that group of people but manages many other managers, has managers saying, "My people are quitting their jobs. What would you like me to do?" And so I think there
I,
is you know, there's I don't see why I need to come and sit at my desk and do what I'm doing at home, which is the same thing,
yes.
especially as the economy and companies have globalized. Who knows where people are and who cares? They could be working anywhere, and that's great because we get so much different points of view and thinking and different cultural perspective and different lived experience perspective, and we know each other
Mm,
differently because we've been in
yes.
each other's homes now for years.
It's so funny because you say that because I just think back of some of these video conference calls we were doing in the early days, and we opened up this CEO of the company I was with. He wasn't super. His strength was not super warmth, right? He was very analytical and pretty. He was not an extrovert, right? You could say he
Mhm.
wasn't an extrovert, and so everything he did that was human was hard for him. You could feel it. It was not easy for him, but he was the most humanist person in the
Mm,
and during COVID. He would always ask I was just really like, I'd get on a call and I would just completely miss the point. We were in his home. We were in her home and his home, and
yeah,
the
yeah,
kids were right, probably having lunch right there because not
yep,
everybody had big houses. And,
yeah,
and he was so human. He would always open with, "How's everything at home?
right,
How's your mom? How's your
right.
dad? How's your kids? What's going on at school?" We'd spend 5 minutes talking about the person. And, it's like, holy cow, you never thought he's pretty hard, pretty cold business person in a way, right? Would be the
Mhm,
outward look, but
yeah,
actually really thinking about people on the inside. And, just great to
mhm.
see how fast some people can show you who they are,
Right, and I love
truly
that.
underneath.
I love that because when you know people's story, all human behavior makes sense.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I get why this person's so stressed out or so tired," and they got 3 kids that are under the age of 4 years old, and they're a single parent. Or,
This is
"Wow, of course they need, like, 9 cups of coffee and look like maybe the cat dragged them in this morning." No wonder. But the
no,
absent
right.
that context, in the absence of information, we make up the story for ourselves. So
Oh,
I
so
guess I
true.
fundamentally believe if we show up fully, and that doesn't mean every aspect of our life has to be shared in intimate detail, but when we show up fully, then people can meet us where we are, and we can do the same. And that's where magic happens, right?
I
That's the alchemist at work right there.
I totally agree. That's why I have, one of the is I came off the road from the jar project, the kind of the idea that I wanted. I felt a little bit selfish because I was using the jar
Mm,
one on one, and I would have these deep, intimate conversations with people one on one. And the podcast didn't have a huge reach, and we weren't global, and people flocking to listen to them. But there was magic happening with the jar, and I thought, man, if if people could see each other at work like I see the people I interview, it would be game changing in the office. And so what's one of the things I'm doing is bringing the jar, to companies to bring it into bring it into the office and set the jar down and let people
I love it.
take spin the bottle, but we're going to spin the jar.
Mhm,
And, you
mhm.
pull a question, then I listen to you. And then, I pull a question, you listen to me. And so just the being heard and being seen and listening, right there is a game changer. And then the
Huge.
content of the questions, the depth of the questions will really, I think, open up people's hearts for each other, and
Yeah,
a
yeah,
way to know
I
each other.
agree.
And without somebody asking you the question,
Right,
you
right.
you pull you're the one that pulled the question,
Yeah,
right? So
you
the
pulled the
best part
question.
is
Yeah,
it's the question you're supposed to get.
yeah.
So I'm pulling another question for Laura.
We'll just see.
Yeah, let's see if you want to answer it or
Let's
not.
see if it's my question.
Let's see if it's your question. Well, I pulled it, so it's a little tricky in this scenario. Have you changed as a person over the years? Or I'm sorry, how have you changed as a person over the years?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Uh, well, if it was a yes or no question, sure, yes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
how
Sorry,
I
it's a
have,
how.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah, I think I would hope so because things happen, and if you're,
Hmm.
what's your response to life? Like you can either stay where you are or you can grow. I think that the things that are probably the most that I see as the most dramatic for me are I am increasingly more comfortable with uncertainty. And
Yeah.
that has been a very big journey for me. If my
Okay.
husband was listening to this, he'd say, "You're what? You're more comfortable with what?" But I
Yeah.
think that, and by that I mean, I I have a history where predictability was really important
Yes.
and in my life and in my professional life, and I will use this word on purpose. Predictability was a way to ensure the psychological safety of myself
Yeah.
and others, right?
Okay.
And I think over time, what I've realized is that I can peel that back a bit and still create the kind of environments that are thriving and healthy
Mm.
and positive, and they don't require controlling and relentless Laura to show up every day. And because she's a protector, like that's her primary chief, that's her mission in life is be a protector. And I think if you're being a protector, you're in preservation mode. And I think how I've really probably
Yes.
shifted the most is I see myself as a facilitator. Not a, I mean, I facilitate things, but
Yes.
more
Yeah.
a facilitator of growth. Maybe if I like alliteration too, so facilitator, fertilizer, fan the flames. Like I think that has become much more of who I am and how I show up and what gets me excited every day. Why am I excited? Even just our conversation.
Mm.
I was so looking forward to this because I love the first conversation we had, and there's so much cool juice and just exploring what does it mean to be human and how do we change every day? How does life change us every day? Who do we
Yeah.
shape? So yeah, I feel like I've changed a lot over the years, and not a lot over the years.
Is it the clients that have changed you, seeing them because they're coming to you in an uncertain state or a state of change? Usually, I mean, you don't seek a coach out unless you want change. And so, is it an inside out or an outside in, or kind of a maturity from inside out, or is this an outside in kind of growing you and giving you that a confidence that you can do it, work in space that's not 100% controllable?
It's a really interesting question. I can't say that it's either or. And I think maybe what has helped that is so much of my early career was really looking at advocacy work, looking at advocacy in some form, whether that be, policy, system, behavior change, those types of things. And I did a lot of campaign work in that. So change was always the goal, like status quo is never the goal. And I think as I evolved in that work, what I started doing more of was connecting with leaders who are trying to steward that work, trying to shepherd
Mm.
that into the future, trying to birth something new. And over that time, that sense of like I'm who I am and I'm just going to be
Yes.
rooted,
Yeah. Yeah.
fixed, like that doesn't work. Like, and in the coaching world, we talk
Uh,
literally daily. Probably everybody, the word growth mindset probably gets sent like 25 billion times a day by coaches, right? It's
yeah.
probably the
Right.
most overused phrase. What does that mean? It means show up, be open, be curious, be willing to learn. And if you're not willing to do that, then what's the point? Because you're not going to get
Yeah.
anything different. You're just going to
Yeah.
get more of what you've got.
Yeah, because you're in this space of possibilities, and
Yes,
you have to kind of sometimes you can't control the client to a destination. You can't make them see the red case.
exactly. Yep.
You can't like no matter how many times you tell them it's red, they'll still look at you and say, "I don't see it."
Absolutely. I don't see it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's going to be fat.
And that,
Humans are
it
fascinating.
reminds me, people are so fascinating. And it reminds me too, I think I might have mentioned this in our prior conversation, but for many years, probably I think the first time I ever drew this on a wall was, I could tell you exactly when it was. It was like 20 years ago, and it was in a meeting for the Oregon Commission on Children and Families in Salem, Oregon. And
Okay.
everyone was talking about, we're talking about advocacy and money and how to get money moving into services, right? And I'm watching them talk about this, and I'm realizing they're talking entirely transactionally. We need to get X so that we will get Y number of people served, sort of like McDonald's, 100 million served or whatever.
Yes.
They were thinking like that. The money was to get to the number. And we had this whole conversation about no, the money is actually, yeah, the number matters, but the number only matters in the quality of the experience people have in their life. Like, are their needs met? Can they learn?
Yes.
Are they
Yeah.
ready for school? And the same can be true. I mean, that parallel applies to every leader I work with, right? Like, if they're only thinking about how I make my person the most productive, check the boxes, do the widgets, version 3.0 or 9.0 of my software, whatever it is, they're missing the person. And that person will go somewhere else. They
Oh,
will. And that might be
absolutely.
fine. Maybe they will anyway, but they will leave as a better leader. And I'm finding, and I'm sure many of my fellow coaches would say, some of the people they've worked with long term, because I have many clients I've worked with for a long time, they're not there to just reinvent the wheel. They're there to continually evolve their leadership. They want to grow the people around them, and they become the coach of themselves and of
Yeah.
their people. And it's so fabulous because that's how real change happens, right? You can't have that if the leader isn't going to internalize that themselves.
That's that relationship you talk about.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah.
And it's
Well,
a it's a it's a thing that I draw all the time, this infinite loop, right? And the ribbon of that loop is relationships. And I've been drawing this forever. And I think when we reward only the activity, the transactional side of things, and we starve the side that is about how I show up as a human, we will eventually lose all our humans. And no
mm,
one will be there to do the transactions because they don't care. They know you don't care about them. So
yeah.
they're going to walk away. We don't want
Yeah.
that. Nobody wants that.
One of the in the description of the humanist, I have kind of talk a little bit about a company called shapepowered.com. And Ali Khan is the CEO there. And we met a couple months ago and I was circulating some information on the jar works, bringing the jar to the office. And a CEO in Asia referred me to London, kind of one continent to another continent, across my continent, and connecting us, kind of skip connecting us. And it's amazing what they're doing over there at Shape. And they take 12 areas of the company, the employee experience. So they're really an employee experience company, kind of masquerading as a survey, kind of a human resources kind of industry. But they do surveys, employee surveys. But it's the first time I've ever seen one which is totally employee centric. And
Mm,
because it's employee centric, the data you get, the information you get as a manager or a leader or as a CEO, sitting, if you're sitting in the executive room, holy cow, because you
yeah.
find out how enabling you are. So
Yes.
you can have all the strategies and you give all the talks. Even your strategy can be well known around the water cooler, but are
Hmm.
you enabling it? Are people in a position where
Yeah.
they can actually do the role they're supposed to do and help contribute to the greater, all the little pieces that add up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, as you're talking about that, I was just kind of thinking, about that. You need everybody in the organization, and there's so
Yes.
many parts to get perfect. Like there's a lot of moving parts in an
Yes.
organization, and it's not easy being in the leadership role.
No, and when you don't know your people, it's really hard to trust.
Oh, yes,
And
I
vice versa when they don't know you.
and when you don't have a relationship, I don't, I just the CEO
Absolutely.
says things, but I don't know if I believe them. I don't know
Right.
how true. One of the I told a story about. It's funny. We were talking to a client together. Ali and I were talking, and they have their very specific way that they present. The 12 parts. They have 4 parts, and then they have from the 4 parts, the 4 key areas they measure. There's 12. Kind of little bits and pieces of the 4, and I had my own version of explaining how it worked, and I could see how is because he's a scientist guy, he's a data guy,
Mhm.
he's a programmer, so he's got a different angle, and I have this totally different view of how I explained it. And the last part was saying, essentially the how serious the company is about what they say. You have your mission and you have all that stuff. And then at the end, it's how much really what this says is how serious are you about what you talk about? Is it
Yeah.
a is it a is it a tagline or is that a
Right.
truth? Is it a
Right.
true north for the company? And are you doing
Yep.
what, everything? And holy cow, it's amazing how many companies get this wrong.
Oh, every day. Every day.
Yeah.
Every
Yeah.
day.
Not like I said, it's not easy being in the leadership role, but aligning those things
Mhm.
um, really
Mhm.
does put you in a better position to be successful, and also for people to enjoy
Mhm.
the job, coming to work, having
For
fun
sure.
or dialing in.
And something you said just reminded me that one of the things I'm noticing a lot is you can have, um, alignment with some leaders. So I'll give
Hmm.
you an example. A recent or very large organization I've worked with for a while, their, um, their leadership team, spearheaded by the person who's their head of people ops, chief people ops person, created a set of commitments for, if you will, about what does
Mm.
it mean to lead in this organization, right? Brilliantly done, like beautiful. I would subscribe to any of them, right? Only the problem was they owned it and no one else in the leadership team cared. And so
Yeah.
they're
Oh
in a
yeah.
very large or enterprise, right? They're trying to get people to embody these things because, and we have posters and we have Zoom backgrounds, we have all the things, but actually, guess what? No one's being measured on whether they do things that way or not. There's no,
Oh yeah.
there's no KPI for that. There's no in your performance evaluation or when I give you kudos or
Yeah.
when I think about who I assign to you as a new person that you reports up to you. None of that is looked at. And they went to great pains to detail the short, the tagline, the just do it version, and then the very detailed things and the evidence and the behaviors and how we would know. And it was brilliant piece of work, except there was no buy-in from the more senior executives who really were the ones who were making the decisions about how we reward what gets done. And in the end, what they really rewarded was transactions. Get
Oh.
stuff done, things, and if you have to run over people to do it, so be it. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, one of the strong commitments is caring about people, and they're looking going, "But wait a minute." They put all this money into training people, growing people's skill, and
Oh real. Oh
all
goodness.
stuff, and then it's like, "Guess what? It's your performance evaluation." You know what, Ken? I guess, I hear you're a really caring guy, but you know what? I don't really care about that because this is the only metric I'm measuring you on. And so dealing with that kind of dynamic for me as a coach is so fascinating because leaders wonder why are people not
Yes.
doing the things that I want them to do? It's like, well, look at your reward systems.
Oh,
Look
those.
at the reward system. Like, look no further than what do you actually appreciate people for, recognize people for, pay people for, bonus people for, promote people for. That's what you care about. If that's what you're rewarding, that is what you value. So
I
get those things
love
aligned.
it, and
It's
not
great.
easy to get. Not because somebody's really. You've got a leader or a manager whose job is to get X done. And
Yes.
then all of a sudden, somebody comes up with some cuckoo harebrained idea, some mantra, that sounds great, but it's
Yeah.
it's going to keep me from getting, my bonus.
Right.
It
Right.
just, I'm going to put the umbrella up. No one's going to see that sunshine.
No, no.
We're gonna get the widgets out.
And then the notion that somehow those are mutually exclusive things, that we can either be
I
very productive or we can be a great work environment,
no.
great work environments are very productive work environments. We're there to do a job. It's not summer camp, you know?
Oh, there's the Shape Powered. They have, and not just them, but I mean, that's one of the places you can get just great
Yeah,
data on the power of flourishing.
which is amazing. We
It's
need that
like
data. We
9
need it.
times more productive. The stock value
Yes.
is X more. It's compared to a peer, it's more than double the
Yes.
value of a company
Yes.
just by focusing
Yep.
on the people first. And
Yes.
that is as powerful as it gets. And it's really changed, even the kind of the speech, the way that I'm going to present some of the ideas that I've got,
Mm,
over the years,
yeah.
how to give a presentation, how to give a talk to to a company is going to be way different now. It's the ideas are there, but it's the why.
Right.
Why
Right.
you're gonna, here's the idea which people can get and you can spend good time on that. But the why this is important and why, how it's going to help you as a
Right.
company. When you
Right.
were talking about those metrics, I kind of laughed because I can think of quite a few times back in my career sitting down with somebody to go over the year and they would have their numbers. They would have, here's my KPIs and here's what I
Right. Yeah.
did. And I was more of this kind of like I was looking at the soft stuff. And that's why I'm going to get a 20% raise because, right here,
Right. Right.
here it is. I crush the numbers. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
but you're a terrible
And you
human.
crushed the soul of half the team while you
Yeah,
were at
but
it.
you're also a terrible human. And if you're like, your turnover,
Exactly.
your
Yes.
turnover is really high. You can't keep anybody. You start going through some
Yeah.
of the other stuff, and they're like, yeah, but that's like 5% of my stuff. 80% of it's this. Who cares about
Yeah.
how I got there?
Yeah.
And it's for me, it was an aha. Like you're right.
Yeah.
Actually, you're actually right. And you find out, boy, that's a tough message to actually hand back to the person and say, I know we
Yeah.
told you to do A, but actually B matters too.
Right. And
Um,
that's why I think it's so crucial to be clear about what does matter,
yeah.
with,
And but
there, and I think in many respects, I think a lot of organizations in the not for profit and public sector actually have um, evolved farther in what they measure
yes, yeah,
than people in the private sector, and they're accountable in different. They're not just
sure.
accountable to the shareholder; they're accountable to the public at large. So I think
Yes,
that
yeah,
has caused some different ways of thinking about what are we measuring, and I fundamentally don't believe that you have to be terrible to people and ruin the planet in order to succeed at anything. I just don't believe that. And so, and by the way, if you do that, so then everybody dies on the planet does too, and then what do we got? Nothing.
yeah,
So
it's
I
a bad
think
strategy.
there's the short-sightedness of, well, it's business, it's just business. It's like anytime I see that kind of just business stuff, it's like you are missing the boat. You are not going
Mm,
to be sustainable over the long term. And turnover is expensive, and people screwing up because they're afraid is expensive. Mistakes are expensive, and I'm a big fan of Tim Clark's work in psychological safety, and I think what
yes.
he's been doing around that has been so powerful, and really looking at what is the cost of an environment where you don't care? What is the
Oof.
cost? 'Cause it's real. It's a real cost.
I know I've checked out of organizations and roles, and one good idea, in certain roles, one good idea is millions of dollars,
Yes.
both ways, on top revenue and cost. So,
Yep.
people doing repetitive functions, people that really know their role, that know their work. I mean, they have ideas on how
Yeah.
to fix stuff, and we just don't even
Right.
ask them.
Right. We don't ask.
It's
Yeah.
so curious to me, all the stories that I've got, just when we're breaking
Yeah.
down some process and you talk to the person actually doing it and you're like, "Wait a minute, you
Yes.
do what?" Like,
I
you
know.
do
I know.
and then you do what step, and then that step, and that how did this happen? Who's been watching you? Who's helping you? And they're just like, "Oh, this is
Right.
just what," they're over there every day. They basically come to the office, we strap a 5-pound weight around their ankle and throw them overboard, and 8 hours
Right.
later, we pull them out of the water.
Right.
And they come back the next day, and I'm like, "How do you keep coming back?"
Right.
You know?
Right.
Just
And they can do
shocking.
it for a while, and eventually they'll just be so tired of doing it, they won't wanna do it anymore.
They won't want to come back.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
who's a great client for you? I mean, what's
Mm,
right now? You get that email in your inbox. Um,
mm.
who's that client you're looking? Who's perfect match for Laura,
Gosh,
or
I was thinking
maybe
who
it's
is in my
all.
in thinking about my inbox and thinking, there's no one in my inbox I don't want there. So
Yeah, I
whatever's
was gonna
happening,
say.
it's working, you know? I think that, people who are really who are either individually or organizationally, who really are wanting who they wanna do the work. They're not there to figure out how to navigate the status quo. They're there because
Okay.
they believe that there is something better, that there's greater potential, there's greater opportunity, that they can
Mm.
contribute either to their organization or to their own career, their own future growth in a meaningful way, and they're open. They're open to outcome. They don't have a predetermined idea about what it's gonna be in
Oh,
the end. They might have goals, but that's
yes,
really different
yeah,
than
if,
being wedded to, an outcome. I had someone come to me once and she said, I have my she was really struggling with kind of her presence, I think, executive presence, the buzzword, right?
okay.
She's really struggling with it, and she wants to fix it. And I'm thinking, okay, like we can fix that, but that's a very tactical thing. Like, what is the fact that you're not showing up with as
Yes,
much of that? What's the cost to you of that?
yeah.
And she was, oh my God, she had just, it had been identified to her that that was a problem for her, right? She didn't necessarily feel it was that much of a problem, but she did recognize that she wasn't showing up in some of the places she needed to show up fully. So her ideas weren't being heard because she wasn't sharing them. She was
Mm.
holding them back or she was putting them in under the radar a little bit. I think, that kind of client is great. I think the ones though that are the most exciting to me are the ones who really want to shape culture in their
Mm.
organizations and they want to do it and they know the culture is there,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
it is, in Clark's work he talks about culture by design or by default. Like lots
yes,
of the ones who come because it's just sort of happened
yeah.
and it hasn't been intentional. And so, really wanting to create culture intentionally, really wanting to be intentional about their leadership. What does it mean to me to lead my team? What can people expect from me as a leader? How can I contribute most to my organization? Like those kind of bigger questions,
Sure.
as opposed to I need to be a better public speaker. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be that. Of course, you can
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
but there's something that get doing that will take you to. So what's the bigger
Yes,
why
yeah,
behind that?
yeah. You're gonna if you
Yeah,
can get those big questions down, you don't have to worry about public speaking. You'll
exactly, because it's all gonna
it'll
fall into
be
place.
natural. Yeah,
Yes,
it'll come from within you.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I think if you have to, I think if from a public speaking, experience, if it comes from inside you, it's really easy. If you have
Yeah,
to, if you're given
yeah,
something to talk about
yeah,
and it's not inside, boy, that's hard, that's rough work. If you don't believe it, if it's not internalized.
yeah,
So I
and
think
I'm just, being a fan of the ancient Greeks, I'm taking us back to Aristotle again, character, competence, and goodwill. That's what you gotta have. If you're that
Arist-
as a leader, it's all gonna work. It's
he
all gonna
was
work.
he was the one that wrote on flourishing.
He did,
Yeah,
among
yes, he's
many
right.
things.
Among
Prolific writer.
among a couple of other
Yeah,
things.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, who was the real writer? Was it really Aristotle or was it just a
Mhm.
group of people? Like, holy cow, that's one brilliant brain.
Yeah.
That is
There's a
really
lot
one.
and there's lots of people equally brilliant now, right? But there's the mechanisms for distribution of information are so
Yeah,
massive now
yeah.
that it's amazing to me how there was a time where I feel like everyone could say, "Oh," or many people, everyone's an overstatement. "These 3 books are the most influential thing you could possibly
Right,
re"
right.
Every day there's thousands of influential
God.
things and thousands of different ways of viewing the world and millions of ways probably. But
Yeah, we've
I think what's been important for me as a leader myself is to know what are my core values, what do I care about, what is below the waterline for me, I will never go there, and where do I belong? And I think that's been important. Those questions have been important in my career for sure.
I think you find if you have those clear in your mind, I think good people find you, the right situation
Yes,
finds you,
yes.
and if
And
you're
here we
true to
are, right?
yourself. Yeah, and here we are, good people.
Here we
Let's
are.
pull let's pull one more question from the jar, and then I'm gonna give you a little wrap I'll give you a little wrap-up chance.
All right.
Ooh. Okay, we're gonna get a little personal now.
Oh, okay.
What have you learned that you might not have if you hadn't suffered?
Wow. That is a
So
profound question.
yeah, and I know a little bit about your background, so this is a pretty
Yeah,
good one. What have you
it's a
learned
good
that you
one.
might not have if you hadn't suffered? I think it's a great one for everybody to contemplate.
Yeah. I think what I've learned is probably twofold. One is that you will rise. You will. You will.
I love that.
And from whatever it is, right? And I can think of many things that applies to in my life. I think the other thing is that um, there's degrees of suffering. And so if I look at it, there are certainly things I could think about in my own life that definitely I think would qualify for capital S suffering, right? And there are little things that are small
Mhm.
sufferings, small little things. And I think knowing that nothing is permanent, um, that that there is somewhere in this, and people say this, and I remember the people saying this to me and hating hearing it, but I've learned so much from those experiences that were so painful and so horrible, and I would not be me today were that not to have happened, and I wouldn't wanna be someone else. So I think
Isn't
that's,
that yeah.
you know yeah.
That is just one of the most interesting parts of, the journey I did with the
Yes.
jar
Yeah,
is I heard some horrific personal stories, like things that I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have gotten through, or I would have
yeah,
sought the exit door,
yeah,
and everybody I talked to was in a better place. They were in that
yeah,
moment. Some of them were on better new roads than other roads,
right,
and some had some, they were on a rough road still and had some things to overcome still on their journey, but none of them would change their past.
yeah,
No matter how crazy the story was, everybody owned it.
yeah,
And so that, this too shall pass is a real part of the human experience, I think. We've
yeah,
got that
for sure.
path to walk, and boy, man, it's not easy sometimes, but somehow, yeah, you get through it and you're better for it.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
really, it's true.
And
It is
it's
true.
true, and you do, and that doesn't mean you would say, "Oh, I'm so glad," like, necessarily, but I think
Yes,
if
right.
I look at what I've learned from that, how has suffering, in various forms in life, and it's all relative, right? Um, how has that influenced me as a leader, as a coach, as a
Mm,
facilitator, as a
yeah.
consultant, as a sister, a wife, a friend, any aspect of my life? I have deep empathy for others, and I
Oh,
fully believe that
oh,
that every behavior there's a
mm,
story associated with every behavior,
behavior.
positive,
Yeah, agree.
negative,
Agree.
neutral, and
Yes.
so it's created. I'm a far more curious leader, I think, than I ever was, and being a coach, like even curious 24 hours a day. Curiosity is the
Yeah.
job, but I think that empathy and curiosity. Um, as I'm now at a later time in my life. Early in my life, I don't think that translated that well. I think, it was more inner directed, like, I asked myself a lot of questions and I doubted myself more. I probably wasn't kind to myself a lot of the time,
Mm.
but I was very kind to everyone else. So I think over time, I've, like, gotten to this place of being like, "Okay, wait, kindness for everyone, including me.
Starting with me.
Empathy for everyone, including me.
Uh,
Like, curiosity for everyone, including me." But it's a dance, and I think some of it probably comes depending on how much suffering you've had in your life and in what ways. Some of it probably comes naturally with age anyway, just because you've had more lived
Yeah.
experience.
Yes.
But I do believe that suffering is a great teacher. It's a great teacher.
It's great. It is a great teacher. Laura, I want to thank you for your time,
Thank
and
you.
your
It's such
wisdom.
a pleasure.
Yeah,
Such
and
a
you're
pleasure.
definitely you've got some you've gathered a little bit of wisdom along the way from all your different clients and all the different situations, right? And your own personal
So much
journey.
more. Yeah,
Yeah,
so much
and
more out there.
for those of you
Yeah.
listening and you like the conversation, you can also catch more of Laura and myself, Laura Dellinger, on Mental Health Today. A great episode, well, not that long ago. Not that
Yep.
long ago. Um, Again, Laura, thanks so much for your time. How do people find you? Just as a reminder, I know LinkedIn is a great place, and I'm sure you've got.
LinkedIn is a great place to find me. Easiest place to find me. You don't have to worry about anything other than my
Yeah,
name, and you'll see me there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks again, and thanks everybody
Thank
for
you.
listening, supporting. Yeah, sorry, and thanks for
Yeah.
supporting the Humanist. You can find us on. If you're listening to us on the audio version, please jump down and give us a couple stars, and then any comments. Really appreciate it because it gives us some idea for guests and direction and what you like about the show. Laura, again, thanks so much for being a guest.
Thank
Hang
you.
around. Yeah, hang around
Yep,
for 30 seconds.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.